Welcome back to our circle of healing and recovery. The elders say it's important for us to practice silence. They say, whenever we get together as a group or as an individual, we should start by being still. I want you to take the next 2 minutes to get quiet and say a prayer to our Creator and ask Him to put words and thoughts in your mind which will help you focus.
In this portion of our recovery series, we're going to be talking about the second step and the power of hope and vision. And we've talked in this last module about the summary of the thought process and how that works as an automatic pilot system, and how old limiting scripts or instructions in that autopilot system can cause us to continue to repeat the old patterns over and over and not be able to break out of that. Well, in this step, we'll learn how to create some new instructions, and we'll build on those as we go along. So first, let's look in our recovery text, and in here we'll find some instructions for the second step. Those instructions can be found on pages 44 through 57 of this book, and it is reading a part that is a chapter called We Agnostics. It's not an unusual thing for people to find themselves at the front end of the recovery process with a strong resistance to any kind of spiritual notion, any discussion of God or church or religion or spiritual concepts kind of gets our back up. And part of that, at least in my case, was I didn't want to get too close to a God that might punish me for the things that I knew I had done wrong. Just in case I was due to get a collection on all of that stuff, I didn't want any part of it. And also, I didn't have a spiritual upbringing. I was not raised around churches or religion, so at least I didn't have anything to get rid of, but I didn't have any real spiritual path or practice in my life. And I really was worried that there might be some sort of a punishing God, and if all of my deeds were to come up to the light of air, I might not like to take the licks. So it was one of those things. Now, this chapter is quite useful for people who have, over the years, created a belief in disbelief, that somehow that there is no power besides ourselves. If the world is going to revolve, then we're the center of it, and it's up to us to bring about anything and everything that we want in our lives. It might be, in our model of ego or self-centered versus higher power-centered, a little bit biased towards the ego side, since our picture of ourselves is the only power in the universe and that there wouldn't be a power greater than ourselves. So this is quite a useful discussion in terms of just other people's experience in thinking about this whole issue around a power greater than ourselves and whether it exists or doesn't exist and how we might connect to it. So that's the came to believe portion, is the discussion here. Now, there's another part of this about we use these 9 areas from the first step. We look at how would we set our direction in 9 areas of our life for hope, for having the things that we haven't had in our life before. So the things that we might want to be looking for would be, what is it in our life that is unmanageable? We've seen that in this first step. Now we're going to have a look at what would our life look like if it was not unmanageable? What would it look like if we didn't have that unmanageability in it? And if we could have it any way we wanted, how would we be in each of the 9 areas from the first step? Not how would they be, not how would it be. How would we be in each of these 9 areas? How would we be in personal relationships? How would we be in making a living? How would we be in being of service to others? That's the vision we're going to create in the second step in these 9 areas. So what we would do is we would write down visions for each of these 9 areas. Now again, we're going to use some techniques perhaps that will help you, some example here of a method you might use to get to these visions or these statements of what the future might be like. So here's a little example laying it out. On one side is the information from the first step. What does it look like today? What does the problem look like? That's a description from the first step. And on the opposite side of that, for step 2, in each one of these, we would write down what would it look like if I didn't have the problem. So sometimes we can't even think of that. We're so ingrained in how it is that we can't comprehend outside of the 9 dots onto the space that we're not used to seeing that way, the way that we've been conditioned to only see the problem. We can't see the possibilities of a solution. So this is about breaking into the unused space. Possibility thinking versus impossibility thinking is the tool of the second step. What is possible? And here's where I encourage people to let their imagination go. If it was out beyond your wildest dream, what would it be like in each of these 9 areas? What could it be like? So there's another tool you could use here. And this is, again, using the mind mapping tool. And a little bit of simulation, perhaps. Suppose you were to have these 9 islands laid out in front of you, and these 9 islands were same 9 islands from the first step. And they look like these 9 dots of your life. And you were to get in your helicopter this time and get above these islands. And you're looking down there and you're thinking, just open space. I can populate this any way I want to. This is my script to write. How would I have it? How could it be? So I look at this island called personal relationships, for example, and I'm up here and I'm looking down. How would Wayne be behaving in relationship to other people? How would I be treating them? How would I be honoring and respecting them? How would we be interacting with each other? What would my part be? How would I be if I could have it without the problem? If I could have it any way I wanted to? If I wanted a happy, healthy, whole, successful life, how would that be? And I populate that using this technique of mind mapping and just free association, whatever. I write out those descriptions and capture a picture comes forth to me of how that would be. And instead of feeling like someone kicked me in the stomach, this one makes me start to feel warm and happy and joyful, because it's a picture of success. It's a picture of balance. It's a picture of health. It's a picture of where I've not been before. And to some degree, if I can't think about what it is, then I might scan around people that I might know of who have these kind of relationships. And say, oh, that's what it looks like. I'd be like this other person. But in the end, you don't want to describe it that way. You want to describe how you will be. But you can borrow characteristics from other people's lives and imprint them into your own. Pictures of hope, pictures of possibilities. And you use this technique now on all of these 9 areas. And what you're doing is you're building now like a picture. You start with a brush stroke on an empty canvas. And then you add another stroke, and you add some color, and you add some texture. And bit by bit, you build up a picture of the future that is healthy, physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, in all 9 of these areas. And people ask, well, how do I know when I've got my vision too far? You know, well, I always tell people, put it right out there on the horizon so it makes you giggle every time you think about it. And then go out just a little bit further, beyond your wildest dreams. As Don said earlier when he talked about the whole overview of the steps, the vision we choose in our second step is what we will have happening in our lives by the time we arrive at the 12th step. Don't cheat yourself here. Don't cheat yourself. Give yourself all the possibilities there are. And what will happen as you progress, I'm always pleasantly surprised by this when people work their steps. I have people come to me and they've got these second step vision. They say, I have trouble even writing this down and looking at it. It's so outside of my experience. I've never had anything like this. But I'm willing to go for it. I'm willing to write it down. And then they'll come back a few weeks or months later, and they're further along in the steps, and they say, I can't believe it. All of this stuff is happening in my life, and I'm not even finished with the steps yet. And I say, don't you wish you'd had a bigger vision? Don't cheat yourself. It's you who declares what the possibilities for the growth in this round of steps will be. And what happens is, to the degree that you create those possibilities, then information, situations, circumstances, people are drawn into your sphere of influence, into your range of perception, and you see that possibility start to occur. This is a really powerful step here. So what you're feeling here is just the opposite of what you felt when you exited the first step. You're feeling joy, you're feeling hope, you're feeling possibilities, you're excited. This is the part that gets us, yes, let me at them. I want the rest of the steps. Let me in, coach. I want to play the game called recovery. Okay, go for it. Work these steps. They're yours to take. So there's another part of this. Now we're building visions. We're building pictures and possibilities we're going to go for. So there's another part of this step 2, which is the vision of a power greater than ourselves. It says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. What are your beliefs about a spiritual entity? One of the things that I found very early on was my God was too small. My God was definitely too small. As I had conceived God, I didn't have a 9-dot God, I had a 1-dot God. And so in the second step, the other thing we do is we open up the possibilities of how big God could be. How big is the Creator? How big is the spiritual power greater than ourselves? And we open that lens up. So the human mind has to put things in frames of reference it can understand. And so we limit the size and scope of God by describing a God that we can relate to. And every pass through the steps is an opportunity to relate to a greater portion of spiritual power than we've experienced before. Regardless of where we're starting today, it's my personal belief that the Spirit, the Creator, is beyond human comprehension. I don't have to worry that I will get my picture of God out past God's capability. I might want to worry that I will keep it so limited that I only experience such a small portion of it that my life does not continue to grow as fast as it could. That's probably my liability. So in this part of it, we have a look at what are our beliefs about God? What are our beliefs about power? What are our beliefs about spiritual things? And we put it on the altar. Say, okay, I'm willing to give up this version of spiritual truth in order to get a bigger and more productive version, one that is more appropriate to who I am and the places that I choose to grow to. And by parking my old belief system and opening up, I now am scanning for that kind of possibility to be real in my life. So I ask myself these questions. Is it possible, just remotely possible, that a power exists somewhere in the universe that is big enough, capable enough, that it could cause this step 2 vision to be true in my life? That could bring about the change in my life that would move me from where I am in my first step stuff to where I would choose to be in my second step vision. Is it possible as a power in the universe that could bring about that change, even in my life? Is that possible? If so, what would be the characteristics of that power? How would I know it if I bumped into it at a stoplight? Won't see it if we're not looking for it. The system will, scotoma, will block it right out. It's not part of our system of environmental scanning today. So in order to be seeing it, we have to be looking for it. So part of this vision setting here in the second step is to create a vision of what are the characteristics of this power. So we would also use mind maps to describe that. And we just start jotting words or pictures of what would be the characteristics of this power that could cause that kind of shift, that kind of healing, that kind of growth in someone like me. Warts and all. I'm not trying to figure out how can I change myself. I'm trying to see, is there a power that I could go in search of that could cause that kind of change to happen? That's the second step work. So in the second step, we set up 10 visions. We set up vision for each of the 9 islands, and then we set up a vision about the characteristics of a power greater than ourselves. That's what we're after. That's what we're going to go for with the rest of the steps. That's the journey. That's the process that takes us there. So having done this, I'm now coming to another step. Step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Do you know how difficult it is to do this step if you haven't started to describe what the characteristics of this power would be? I used to call it praying to the void, turning it over to the unknown. And all I could think of was, why would I do that? Why would I do that? How would I do that? But when I come through the steps this way, and I've got all of this description of the chaos in the first step, I know what I don't want. And in the second step, I have a compelling picture and vision of what I do want. And now I've got the characteristics of the kind of power that could bring about that change in my life that I would choose to have a relationship with. Now I come into this third step in a positive expectation. I'm looking forward to connecting up with this power in a different way than I have before. And that connecting up is made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. What do we understand about this power? Well, it might have the characteristics that we've described. We're certainly going in search of a power like that. Now, why would we turn our will over? Why not just give God this pile of garbage from our first step and say, handle it, handle it. You got the power. Well, it doesn't seem to work that way. We're given free will by the Creator. And through that free will, we end up with results in our life that are the results of our action, which are the results of our behavior, which are results of thinking, which are the results of where we had our will placed. Our will was either placed along the self-orientation or it was placed along the higher power orientation. And we start to see a very clear causal linkage between where we placed our will and how our life is going. And remember in one of these earlier pictures in your workbook, I talked about you get centered up between the higher power orientation and the self-orientation in that first step decision. Step 1, step 2, and part of step 3 gets us to the decision point. Am I going to take the set of tracks that goes this way, or should I take the set of tracks that goes this way? This way leads to more self-will, ego, self-orientation. This way leads to higher power orientation, life of spiritual growth, development, service, humility. Will I choose that path? Do I have the courage to choose that path? Because I've never been down it before. Well, I've certainly never been this far down it before, if I've been through the steps and I'm on this path for some time. Am I willing to take the trip? Will I make the journey? And we make the choice. And in the book, it gives us a method of making that choice. It's on page 63 of this book. There are instructions. The instructions here are to read pages 58 through 63 of the book. And then there's a piece in here which is called the third step prayer by many people. And it goes like this. God, I offered myself to Thee, to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of Thy power, Thy love, Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. Well, that's a pretty good method. And what Don has taught me to do and what we've done over the years with lots of other people is two people, the person who's taking this third step and the sponsor or other person they're doing it with, get on their knees with this book and they do this prayer. And I have to tell you, the first time I did this, this was very strange. I didn't come from a religious background. I wasn't used to holding books and holding hands with other men, I'll tell you that. And I was living on a fourth-floor apartment, sort of on the back of a building. And I remember we got down and we had this book between us and we were kneeling down. And my thought was, what if somebody sees me? Right? They'd have had a fire truck with a ladder on it to get up and look in the window. But I wasn't worried about, was I going to get a spiritual hit here? I was worried about, what if somebody sees me and tells everybody how stupid I'm being, down on my knees with a book with another man saying a silly prayer. That was where I was. Now today I'll do this prayer with anybody, anywhere, because it's symbolic for me of a commitment and a decision I made a long time ago to try to grow along spiritual lines. This particular prayer is in words that aren't familiar to me. You know, I don't talk this way. It feels quite churchy to me. So I do this because I like to pay up my insurance policy, and just in case this is the only channel that God's tuned to, I want to make sure I broadcast on it. But I also usually do this prayer in my own words, in a language that makes sense to me. So I talk to God in my way, asking God to take me as I am, to take my will and line it up with God's intent, direction, service. And for me, that is how the third step is, the action of the third step. All the other stuff up here is preparation, getting ready for this. This is where we flick the switch. Yes, I choose the higher power path. I'm at the junction and I choose the higher power path. How will I progress along it? Well, I'll just do these other steps. That's how I'll progress along it. So the other steps would lead me down this road. So this now brings us to the conclusion of this module, which is the instructions for the second and the third step out of the recovery text, and some building blocks, other techniques we've used for creating visions of hope in the 9 areas, characteristics of this power, and turning it over. So there is another little component here which I want to build just as we exit this, and that is a discussion of what are the characteristics of our relationship with this power greater than ourselves. So the next piece of vision, the final piece of vision, is the relationship with this power greater than ourselves. Interesting thing to try to map out. A vision of a relationship with a spiritual entity. Well, the point I'd like to make is a relationship is a two-party sort of thing. So what I describe is how would this power be in this relationship, and how would I be in this relationship? And then the collecting of that is the description of the relationship between myself and this power greater than myself. And that now brings me the closure I need on this third step. So in the next module, we'll be going forward into the fourth step.
Now is a good time to utilize a talking circle with your group. Focus on a subject which was discussed on the tape. Spiritual matters are difficult to explain because you must live them in order to fully understand them. Thomas Yellowtail, Crow.